Sack and Jack draft night. We stayed up late. It's almost 10 p.m. We stayed up late.
Dude, way too late. Way too late. Past my bedtime, bro.
Way past my bedtime. And you know what? How do you feel draft night went, Rob?
It was frustrating, man. I look at the board.
Mm-hmm.
I wish his name got called, unfortunately.
Bummer. But I thought there was a shot he was going to be mystery relevant, like my good friend Rob Sacre.
But you know what? That's also a good thing, though. When you get drafted that late, you're kind of tied with that team, right?
Mm-hmm.
So with this, now he has the option to look at different rosters and figure out which is the best fit for him.
Yeah. He'll have the opportunity to kind of pick his poison.
Correct.
One of the shockers of the draft was Jalen Suggs not going 4 overall. In fact, going 5 to Orlando. He could have gone to Toronto, which I know you feel for our guy. He had a shot to go to Toronto. Instead, now he's got to make a home in Orlando.
Orlando's cool though. Orlando's a good place, and I'm giving him a lot of praise because I think he can do this where he can change that organization around.
Yeah. Hopefully in 2, 3, 4 years, they're thinking like, all right, we have a piece here in Jalen Suggs. We need to build around him. That'd be really cool. Toronto and Orlando, though, both known for their gentlemen's clubs. So good for Jalen.
Oh, I didn't know Orlando.
Oh my God, big time. Oh, Orlando, Tampa.
I was going to say Tampa.
Well, same thing, right? It's the same kind of deal, right?
Well, I've never been out to those type of places.
Yeah, I'm sure.
In Florida. Well, no, I should. Never mind.
Okay. Corey Kispert, 15 overall, kind of right where people expected him to go. Mid first round, going to Washington. Good.
That's going to be cool.
Yeah.
They played together, correct? They played 1 season or 2?
They played a couple seasons. Wait,
2.
1, 2.
I'm not sure.
2.
It's late for us.
2. Wait, hold on. Yeah, 2 seasons for sure. Corey's freshman and sophomore season.
Right.
So he'll be reunited with Rui. Great stuff. Name the other NBA team with 2 active Zags.
Memphis?
Correct. I don't know why that was like a trivia question because you and all of our listeners know that, but to my friends, that was a good one.
Well, no, and it's cool to see that. And I played with Elias in LA for a couple months, and it's just nice to have a buddy that you know and like you can.
You can let your guard down because so many other times, especially like in the league, I'm sure like. You being a big, like, oh, they're bringing a big in, like, let me put on my
right. You kind of have to
taking
do
my
that.
spot,
right? Yeah. So just to have a guy that you played with, it's a good feeling, man.
And Joel Ayayi's name was not called, but we did have 3 Zags drafted. Rob Sacre.
I know, Philip.
Phil goes 50 overall to Philadelphia. Good for Phil. You know what's great? If he turns into a player, not necessarily an all-star, but like a 10-year guy.
Yeah, he has Gonzaga on his name.
We're definitely claiming him 100%. 100.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No. And congrats, well-deserved. He had a great career at Gonzaga, and I think he's going to have a great career in the league. He's super talented, and sky's the limit.
So overall, good draft night for the Zags. I would have loved to have seen 4 Zags drafted. That would have been epic. Again, we're recording this immediately after the draft, so I'm sure Ayayi is going to sign with someone in the next, I don't know.
Take your time, man.
6
really
to 12
look at their
to
roster.
24 hours. So we will react to that next week. This week, though, Rob.
Philip.
From Philippe to Phil. From Philippe to Big Phil. From Big Phil to the biggest of Phils.
Talk to me.
Spokane. Phil McCarthey gave us an hour of his time a couple of weeks ago when we were in Spokane. If you don't know Phil, I think I described it a little bit when we talked to him. He is, well, first of all, he's the name of the athletic center where the Zags play their basketball. But he's nothing more than just a big Zag fan.
Yeah.
Like that's the best way to describe him. You think you're a fan? Uh, He is. Gosh, I think the first.
Get it out. Get it out, Jack.
If you've never met him, the first like God, 35 to 40 seconds talking to him, you're like, oh my God, this is just a normal guy who just loves his hacks. Like there's no like he's a simple guy. Yeah, I wish he was more complicated than that. I wish I could say he was more complicated than that. He loves the Zags, and he was more than generous with his time, and we really appreciate that. Rob and I have a big, long history with Phil, so we were able to make it happen. He just happened to be in Spokane when we were up there at Board of Regents meetings. Did we talk about the Board of Regents meeting and how boring they must be? I don't remember.
You got to listen.
I guess I got to listen.
You got to listen.
You look, that mustache looks fresh, bro.
Oh, you digging it?
Yeah. Is that a brand new stash?
We were talking about mustaches. Is it okay to do a mustache now? It's not the 80s anymore.
No, it's okay to do a mustache. I think gone are the days though where you're doing a mustache to be ironic and funny. Like that's lame. You know what I mean? We're too old for that. Like at this point, if you're gonna do a mustache and it's not November, be serious about it. And that's a serious mustache.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I can pull that off. You got the little like flavor saver deal that white guys just can't pull off. I mean, it's true, right? Isn't it?
Oh man, I love you, Jack. I love you, brother.
Yeah, you mentioned it, but any advice to the Zags that are entering the NBA Brotherhood?
Yeah, just take your time, and always look to get better each and every day while you're there. Obviously, you learn that at Gonzaga, but this is a special moment in time. Embrace it and take the whole experience in. Boom, and now your career begins, man.
Bingo, bango. Phil McCarthy.
From the corner! Phil McCarthy. If you don't know who he is, A, his name's on the goddamn building.
Yes.
B, he's the guy sitting behind the Gonzaga bench during any huge game screaming at the refs.
Oh, absolutely screaming. I feel like he's a part of the coaching staff.
It feels like it that way, too. He always has the latest polos.
Oh, he's styling and his polos match his shoes. I'm not even. We got it all under. We know you, Phil. What's going on, man? We appreciate you being here.
Well, it's my pleasure to be here. Thank you guys for having me. Get up to Spokane in July. The weather's nice. The company is great. We had a few good things going over at Gonzaga, so it's my pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I guess to start at the beginning, what does that mean? If somebody asks you, how does your relationship with Gonzaga begin? Where do you start?
We'll probably start about 50 some years ago when my brother came up to Gonzaga in Spokane because it was close to Salt Lake City and he still had his girlfriend there. The folks still wanted to. Absolutely. You know what women will do to you.
Oh, yeah.
It was a Jesuit school. So he went there. And then his sophomore year, when he wasn't sure what he wanted to do, he went off to Gonzaga in Florence, Italy. My first 2 years after I got out of prep school in New England, I went to Georgetown. But in the middle of my sophomore year, again, I wasn't sure exactly, did I want to go into government work? Did I want to stay at Georgetown? Was this the right girlfriend? What exactly did I want to do? And at spring break, he said, why don't you go to Gonzaga in Florence? So my relationship started the same year as freshmen became eligible to play big-time football and basketball. And Georgetown then made an astonishing hire when they hired a man named John Thompson. And here Washington State hired George Raveling, and Arizona hired Fred Snowden.
Wow.
Whoa.
Big year. Seismic year.
Yeah.
It was a seismic year, and that's my relationship goes back, almost half a decade.
So you go to Gonzaga in Florence, and you are still very close with the group you went over there with, right?
We've been fortunate that every January we do this, and they've called it the Friends of Phil basketball game. And we send out an email and a few texts, and people come from New York and South Carolina and the Bay Area and Southern California and Texas and the Midwest. So we come up here and you just show up at the Davenport Hotel anytime Friday afternoon. We have a couple who met in Florence, Dan and Mary Huntington, who are local people here. So they open their house on Friday night. And eventually Dan says, I'm going to go get you one more drink. And you realize 10 minutes later, he's gone to bed. So we just got to go through the rest of his liquor cabinet. And, thankfully there's Uber now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Amen.
Then Saturday we meet and go to a game. And then we have a room up at the Davenport where, again, we stay until they throw us out. And about noon on Sunday, people start to leave. But we've been really fortunate to have that group stay that close.
How many consecutive years have you done that?
12.
12, okay.
We missed this one.
Right.
But, so here's what we did instead.
Oh, here he
And
goes.
you guys probably can't
Here-
see this exactly because you couldn't dare see the shot glass. But I actually had
Oh, look at that fleur-de-lis.
some Gonzaga and Florence with the
yeah.
fleur-de-lis with the Giglio on their
Yeah.
masks. And then Tom Hall had the shot glasses made up.
Well, let me get
So
some shot glasses.
this year it had to say, Gonzaga versus the pandemic,
Right.
versus the
Right.
virus.
Right.
But I'll show you those when you guys come down again, because when Adam Morrison and Huddy come down to do a Zag game in Provo, we always come back to Mansion. We get to line up all those little glasses and see whom we've played through the years. But we had to kind of do some things
Yep.
Zoom-wise, but we did have our masks and shot glasses and rooted the Zags on.
Right on.
That is your connection with the Gonzaga and Florence class is so uniquely Gonzaga, because I did the same thing.
You went to Florence?
I went to Florence, but just for a summer, just for 6 weeks. And I was kind of like going back and forth because at that age, when you're 20, it's like, oh, do I want to go spend, 6 weeks of my summer abroad?
When does
Like,
it start?
It starts right after school ends. So mid-May, and then
this
lasts
is
until.
this is a class, right? Or
Oh,
is it-
I was doing class. Yeah.
Okay.
It is. It's a legitimate summer program. Those things didn't exist in our years. And again, things have just changed because all those years ago, everybody was there for a year. You said goodbye to your sweetheart, your
Mhm.
family, and everything there, 8th, 9th, 10th of September. And then he came back and it was almost Memorial Day.
Right.
So it was a little bit different than those things. But Jack, I still encourage you guys, it's never too late or something. They may have a grad program over there. Throw you guys' name on
That's
it.
why I'm asking, because I want to go. I'll go.
And what's nuts about going abroad back then is, you're not FaceTiming people back home. You're not Skyping. You're not emailing. You're hardly even writing letters. I'm sure every here and there. So your correspondence is nothing. If anything, you're really cut off from your home.
Amen.
In the States.
I like that.
And in a strange way, it's almost the best thing for you
Yeah.
because it forces everybody to have to come to grips with those things. There would be mail system in Italy that was about as inconsistent as everything else.
Mhm.
And you just never knew. Some days, I'm sure they just took mail bags and threw them in the river or
Yeah.
burned them or something. You never got them. But what it really did, Jack, and Rob, it's almost like playing on a team or anything else there. We're all in the same storm. We're not in the same boat, but we are all in the same storm during those things. And that's why it just had such a marked impact on us, because then I had two sisters who did not originally attend Gonzaga, but were Gonzaga and Florentine. And I had a daughter who went to University of Arizona, but she's a Florentine.
Uh-huh.
Then we had one Gonzaga daughter. She wanted to do like you did. Can I just go for 4 or 6 weeks? She was
Yeah.
scared to death she was going to miss something with basketball or friends or something.
You know what's funny? I was the same way. I thought the people that went for a semester or a year were crazy. I was like, what if we win the national championship? And I wish I could go back and slap my 20-year-old self, because I'm so glad that I did the summer. But the semester would have been really something special, because it almost takes you 3 weeks to kind of get comfortable with the culture and your day to day. And then, you're halfway through. So if I could do it again, I would certainly go for the full semester.
You might not come back though.
Yeah.
I could see you falling
love
in love with
Florence.
that lifestyle.
Absolutely.
Do you remember I've got my illustrious Gonzaga academic career. I got 2 Ds. Both of them were in Florence.
What did you do?
One was Italian history. I got a D. Italian history, let me tell you something, it's complicated.
It's
Especially
rich in history, isn't
Yeah,
it?
19th century Italian history with all the city-states is complicated. Got a D. The other class I got a D in was ethics.
Well, I can see you not being the best. That's not a surprise to me.
Well, that's not surprising there.
Right.
See, I thought you were going to say something was like, because, after Gonzaga and Florence, I'd originally gone back to Georgetown. And then the dean sat me down and said, Phil, you need to understand that red wine and blonde co-eds is not a real double major.
Oh man.
So Gonzaga and Florence, then you where did you meet beloved Sandy, your wife?
Well, I met her in Salt Lake City, but after I was here and I was the same class as our previous president, Father Bob Spitzer.
Yeah.
And I spent 5 years up here.
In Spokane.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then in March of 1979, Bird and Magic played in Salt Lake City in that epic game. And between games, there was a little blurb in the paper and on the news saying the New Orleans Jazz with Pete Maravich have been given authorization to relocate to Salt Lake City.
Where there is no jazz.
Absolutely. It is kind of an anomaly or something there.
There is no jazz.
So then I went back to Salt Lake City in 1979, and then I met Sandy Labor Day of 1981 and married her in 1982, Labor Day almost a year to the day.
Oh, right on. Right on. So tell me about your relationship with Gonzaga basketball, because I'm sure, obviously, you were a fan. First and foremost, you loved the college and the institution because of the experiences it gave you, right? At what point did you start falling in love with the basketball program? Because it couldn't have been love at first sight, especially back in those days,
It was not love at first sight. There were a few of those nights or something there when and I would have been one of those other people too. Rob, you would have just turned up your nose. I said, I can do better than that. I could have stepped up there and made that free throw or something.
Sure you could, buddy.
Absolutely.
Sure
Absolutely. Rob, it took me years to learn. A lot easier said than done, isn't it?
Talk to me.
Oh.
Yeah.
It was really about the early 90s, and part of it came because we were seeing how good Loyola had been.
Yeah.
Granted, they get the transfers from, USC, and then Pepperdine had still made their little run, and it just started to hit you that, wait, we're playing that conference. Can we not ever get to that level? Finally, in 1995, the Zags reached the NCAA tournament. We get a 15 seed, and where do we play? In Salt Lake City. So, and those are the days we used to play on campus at the University of Utah. But that was really the one where it hit, because after the game, the athletic director, coach at that time, and the president, we went to a little place and had a cocktail or two. And he was kind of looking around saying, we should do this every year. And we kind of looked and said, well, yeah, that would be an admirable goal or something there, but it's a lot easier. Because we had a number 15 seed. We drew Maryland with a 2 seed with that Joe Smith. And we have
number 1 overall pick, though.
Absolutely. Rob, he gets a third foul, 12 minutes into the game. They brought in another kid named Booth who just lit us up.
Calvin Booth?
Calvin possibly Booth? He would have been a freshman, that Maryland team. But anyway, so we get through there because they made a deep run and you thought they were awfully good. And you thought, okay, the Zags. But at least Gonzaga then started to put their nose in there a little bit, and you get people like Matt Santangelo to say, well, maybe there is something to Gonzaga. And they started to play in Alaska and played in one of those other tournaments.
Yeah. The Great Alaskan Shootout.
The Great Alaska Shootout, right?
Man.
And, that was a
I played in it. I was the last. It was
the last one we played it.
Yeah, it was awesome. It was a great
wasn't
experience.
It fun? It'd be 10 o'clock in the morning and it was still dark out. And you say, why do they start the games at 2:30?
Yeah.
Because otherwise it was nighttime.
It was the first time I ever saw a moose, and it was walking right downtown in the middle of it was the craziest thing I'd ever seen.
They're social creatures. You would be a moose if you were an animal, I think. You're a big dude and you like to say hi to people,
Are they that?
I think so, yes.
A moose would be a good
Yeah.
thing or something. I want to be sitting across the table from Rob when I'm telling him he's the moose, but rather than right.
Yeah, I thought it'd be a little bit more elegant, but I guess they'll be all right.
So late 90s, yeah.
So then we get to 98, and the Zags lose in the conference tournament finals to USF, University of San Francisco. And ironically, that's the year Utah makes their great run. And who does Utah draw the first night out is USF. Well, that Gonzaga team, and I don't remember the exact record, I'm going to say they were about like 26-3, and they were just stunned when they didn't get an at-large invite. And you're trying to explain the RPI and that sort of thing. So that was that group, and that's the Santangelo and Quentin Hall and those guys who just determined that they would never let that happen again. And Casey Calvary said, what do we need to do? So from then on, they've always made sure that they took care of business and didn't ever leave it to an outsider. But that's when it really hit, was all of a sudden it was 1999. And you say, hey, these guys are good. We can almost line up and play with anybody. We're ahead of UConn for 36 and a half minutes. We ended up national champions. So
it's remarkable going back to 99. There's so many moving parts that if one thing goes a different way, I don't know if we're sitting here today talking about the glory of the Gonzaga basketball program. Minnesota had the cheating scandal. We drew them first. Stars like Bobby Jackson had to sit. And that, they lose to Gonzaga. They hire a new coach, Dan Munson. And then, here we are now. How much credit do you give those 3 weeks in 1999 to those guys?
I give all the credit to those guys, and especially, a couple of years before that, because there were guys like that who started to believe in that. Jeff Brown, Sam Tangel, and all of those guys that said, hey, we can do this. And you start to see, in later years, the Corey Violettes and some of those people and then all of a sudden you start to get kids from the east, from the west side of the state who can shoot the eyes out of the basket. Mm-hmm. You say, oh my God, these guys could shoot and play anywhere. So you give them all the credit. They are the guys who did the heavy lifting. If you're ever talking about people who dug the trenches and planted the strong foundation, those are the guys, and especially that team the year before and the 99, the 2000 team.
So 99, 2000, 2001, 2002, et cetera, et cetera. Obviously Gonzaga continues to make these deep runs in March. In the back of your head, how quickly, how soon were you thinking, we need a new venue out here in Spokane? The Martin Center is great. It's charming, but not quite enough. And how much do you contribute to, or how much credit, I think, would you assign to people like yourself rallying around the program and the program itself just winning? I guess they're one and the same.
It's an interesting thing because actually there's somebody who thought we needed a bigger arena before I did. And we were having a meeting at the McCune Mansion in Salt Lake City. And as they're coming up the steps, Father Bob Spitzer turned to Mark Few and he said, now we're going to ask these guys about a little athletic scholarship, or there's some things that we need to do in this Martin Center or something like that. And Spitzer said, Mark Few turned and said, heck no, we're going to ask them for a new arena. So that's kind of where that started. And then we sat, and the idea started really to take shape really from Mark Few saying, do you guys believe in this enough? And we said, well, we do. And he said, but here's what it's going to take. So it's probably about the 2000 to 2001, you realize Gonzaga goes to Sweet 16 3 straight years.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And what do you need to do so that you don't end up as DePaul or Loyola or one of those things?
Capitalize.
And here was the biggest thing. He said, here's what we need to do.
It worked.
So we wandered around and said, is there anything else you can do with this arena? And he said, no, you'd be better off to just start from scratch. So it really started to take shape then. But quite frankly, the idea comes from Mark Few and Father Bob Spitzer.
Thank God for that, because I wouldn't be going to Gonzaga if it was the Martin Center. I'll be the first one to tell y'all I would not go. When I walked into it, I heard all about it, and I can't, I know there's a lot of tradition within the old teams, but there would be no way in hell I'd go.
Oh, I can't imagine. It would be a totally different landscape in college basketball.
100%.
If that building isn't built.
Yes, because it just, as a recruit, when you get on campus, that's almost the first thing you want to see is for some reason, the locker room. You want to know what the locker room looks like, and the arena. Where am I going to play? And when you get onto the court, that's when you walk onto the McCarthey court, you're like, oh, this is big time. That's a great, and then you're like, you know what? I could play in this place. And so that being said, it was the biggest turning point after going to the tournament for me.
What I love about the McCarthey Athletic Center is that it's very nice. It's very well made. You walk in and you're like, this is a palace, but it's still only 6,000 seats.
Correct. And that's the best part.
Huge. And anyone who comes in for the first time to see a Gonzaga basketball game, they're like, at first they'll walk in and be, it's kind of humble in here. And then the thing fills up and you can't hear yourself think. Was that important to you guys? I mean, you don't want to build a 15,000 seat arena, although today you'd fill that thing no problem.
But who wants to put that pressure on?
Right.
It was very important to us. There were really a couple of things that we looked at. One was, what was the optimal number? And we got some statistics. That's where Mike Roth and those people were so important to say, here we think this is the number, but also then geometrically, even to put another 2,500 seats, the costs were astronomical. So you had to take the costs into consideration, but also the thinking was, we want everybody, like they're doing now, saying, how in the world do I get in there? What do I have to do to get in there?
Right.
Rather than many of these places now say, hey, come on in, we're having 2 for 1 night or student night or something like that. So that was really, really important to have a place that we wanted to feel that way. Then the only other things that I ever had any impact or interest on, I wanted to make sure those sight lines were exactly the same. I wanted those students right on top of them. We wanted that poor kid from Pepperdine or Loyola getting ready to throw the ball in, and some Gonzaga student with his shirt off about 6
Jed
inches
Keener.
abs.
Jed Keener. Yeah.
and then the only other thing was we wanted the students on top of that. Students we know are going to stand up. So can we raise the level of that? That's a geometric or an algebraic thing, so that you didn't have kids and people saying, hey, sit down, I can't see that. The people, and we used in those days, the average student was 5'10". That was probably a little too small. But the kids, we wanted them standing up and all that time, but that the people around them and over them could still see without getting into, hey, we can't see, sit down.
You guys got the same, the same architect from Xavier? Because I believe Xavier was built with the same idea, or we built our idea. It's something similar. I know you guys have some kind of similarities with that.
Right. I thought they did theirs after ours.
Yeah.
And I may be mistaken on that, but we played the one New Year's Eve out there or something. I thought theirs came a little bit. So, interesting, Rob. I'll have to remember exactly where we came up with that particular thing when they decided the architect and the contractor.
Because it's just like you said, you can see the court from every angle, other than the band being in front of you or sometimes, but that's all right. Like you can see the court from every angle. That's what I love about it. And when someone is standing, you can still see the court, and it's a great. I don't think of any other place to play in. I can't think of anything that's better.
No, like you said, it's the perfect mix of insane, awesome environment. It's a very nice facility, and I say that's an understatement. It's an excellent facility. It's kind of built into the natural hillside there. There's the natural waterfall that is built around it, but it's the hottest ticket in town. It's the hottest ticket in the region, and will continue to be for the next decade or so. It has been for the last 15 years and will continue to be. So I can't imagine in your wildest dreams you thought that it would work out as well as it did.
We did not. We were certainly hoping, we were believing this would be awfully nice or something like that. But the idea that at some point UCLA, North Carolina, Xavier, Illinois, Wake Forest, some of those teams becoming a place in Spokane was still asked, just would have almost seemed absurd and cynical at the time. So it has exceeded that. The one thing that I didn't realize, though, how important it was to Spokane, because one of life's great things now is there's concerts in there. There are speakers. There are events going on.
Right.
And I've had the opportunity now twice to be in that facility as a trustee, presenting a Gonzaga diploma, one to Molly as a law grad and to Marin as an undergrad. So one of life's great things, being able to present degrees from Gonzaga to your daughters there.
Right. Can't imagine. Yeah. Can't imagine. Back to the scheduling portion of things. Obviously, you guys struck when the iron was hot. Gonzaga had gone to 3 straight Sweet 16s, and it worked out perfectly because you opened the McCarthey Athletic Center in 2004, 2005 season. Then how frustrating was it to continue to be denied by big time programs who wanted to play you guys, but maybe at a neutral site, maybe in the Spokane Arena, maybe in Seattle? You know what I mean? How long was it until you thought that you were getting the right teams to come in there?
I think one of the things that really hit was obviously Michigan State, because we had the relationship, with Judd Heathcote. Mm-hmm. So I think that sort of opened the door. But also then in those earlier years when Rick Majerus had left Utah, and then you're starting to get a new coach say, hey, this is a great program, and we can do some of the New Year's Eve, exchange home and home away. So it was frustrating in a way, but we didn't, focus too much on it in the sense that we will play in these early season tournaments in Maui, in the Bahamas, in Orlando, and really hold your own. And the fact that somebody does not want to come play in your arena in January, okay, they'll learn.
Yeah. I can't imagine your sense of pride when, like a UCLA comes in, an Arizona comes in, a North Carolina. I mean, I'm sure I remember in college, it was a big deal when we got Wake Forest.
Yep.
It was a big deal when we got an ACC team. Like, what? Wake Forest? Now we're getting the legs of North Carolina, and they're coming in and they're getting housed. I can't imagine the pride that swells within you.
Well, we feel awfully good about it, and it is just one of those amazing things that you say to people, enjoy every moment of it, because UCLA, the idea of UCLA playing Gonzaga in Spokane on campus all those years ago would have, it just couldn't exist. And we get North Carolina, Michigan State again at the top of their games. And Xavier. We've had Notre Dame and Illinois and those good San Diego State teams. You notice your friends from across the state on the west side there. I can't remember exactly who that is. But remember, for the longest time, they came in and got hosed and didn't want to come for 9 years or something. So, no, it was a great thing. But also, Jack and Rob, make sure credit goes to the players, the coaches, the staff, but also think about the Tim Barnards and the Jack McCanns and the John Lugers and the John Stone. There were so many other people from Gonzaga, the community involved too. So let's always make sure that everybody realizes, while it may have our name on it, it really belongs to everyone.
Well, and we want to just change the subject a little bit. Being a part of the trustee, what is now the biggest challenges you guys are facing?
The biggest challenge athletically at the university or university-wise? Well, quite frankly, is going to be this, name, image, and likeness, because there are so many variables and nobody can define exactly what it is. We know this morning when we had one of our meetings, you can go through certain things, say, well, it's not this, and you can't do this, and you can't do that. Where we start to really have some concerns is, are there people outside the program that are going to be, helping these young players exactly with his name, image, and likeness? Now, have they been part of our Gonzaga community or not? And the fact is, Rob, you and I were talking off, there is still a finite amount of money. And at some point, if that pot starts to have another hand reach into it, that could affect us some. I'm not sure we're going to see it the next year or two, but over a certain period, I am afraid we are going to see that. So it's that, the name, image, and likeness, and then everybody's trying to get a handle on exactly what is the future of, say, the conference. Because we are afraid that the haves are going to have and have and have and have more. And there's going to be several of other sister schools are going to have problems.
And that's the problem. We talked off air about this. That's the slippery slope about this whole thing. It's you want people to get paid for the work they do. That's America. That's just what it's about, But getting paid is going to take money away from other programs.
I have the opinion that, okay, for example, Chet Holmgren, okay, the number one high school player in America coming to Gonzaga. He already has 300,000 Instagram followers. He is a brand like Nike's dream.
Yes.
Okay. So let's say he signs a deal with Nike. It's X amount of money. He wears hoodies on Instagram, does his Instagram stories, et cetera, et cetera. 2-3 years down the road, Nike might look at it and think, okay, we overpaid a Chet Holmgren. This year, we're going to pay that player, half of that. I think there's going to be a market correction, and that a few years down the road, brands are going to look at what they spent.
Go ahead.
And I think the waters will level a little bit.
That's not going to be the issue. The issue is the money that was the sponsorship money that was supposed to go to the school. That is where it's not going to be going to the school anymore. It's going to be going to
the individual players,
which takes money away from other programs. People don't realize that's where most of the money comes from. Yes, hey, we want to sponsor Gonzaga basketball. We're going to give you, Sacred Excavation is going to give you this much money, and we're going to pay for whatever but that money actually goes to other programs.
Right.
And,
I understand that.
And that's where it gets kind of tough, because once that money gets taken away from the sponsorship money gets taken away from basketball, well, and it goes to that player, then those programs are going to lose so much.
So what would you suggest to be the solution there? It's the Wild West.
I wish I had an easy solution or something.
But players do need to get paid.
Yes. And I'm sad that the NCAA didn't sort of get ahead of some of these things. I mean, we've seen this thing coming and
100%. It's been like 20 years.
And, they had the opportunity to, quote, kind of get ahead of some of those things. But I think we could stand up here and say the biggest challenge is, why don't the powers that be, what they call the Power Five, take the football and go do what you need to do with that? And you can argue amongst yourselves. You can play bowl games. You can do any of those things that are outside the NCAA anyway now. And let's get back to the collegiate sports, because what I'm afraid is strangling this golden goose or something in the name of football. There are certain Power Five schools, no matter how much money they spend, they're never going to make an impact and get to a Rose Bowl or anything.
No, and what's going to happen is, like you said earlier, it's going to be the haves and have-nots in college, all college athletics, and that's the scary part about this whole deal. Granted, yes, athletes need to get paid, especially for image and likeness and all that, but to what extent does this? How do you manage all that is the tough question.
And I have complete confidence that we will work through this. Mike Roth is handing off the baton to Chris Standiford, and we've got Shannon Strahl and Ryan Oliver. So we've got good quality people who have been involved in some of these discussions. But I think sometimes we're looking for all the answers. We need to make sure we have all the questions, because the biggest thing that's going to come about sometimes is making sure our former players, our boosters, our alumni and things understand what they can and can't do. Because I'm always afraid that people read some little blurb or hear something that says, oh, I can suddenly decide that I'm going to go pay Rob Sacre $10,000 to come represent my store or something like that. And there are still certain rules before we get to all of the wild, wild west. But also what we need to make sure about is, Rob, if I give you the $10,000 to represent my tire store, that does not guarantee me the best tickets at Gonzaga basketball.
Right.
To your point earlier, Mike Roth made the same point. He thinks in the not so distant future, Power Five will break off and they'll do their own football thing. Because as much money as Gonzaga basketball makes, it's a drop in the bucket compared to a middle of the road Power Five football program, right? That being said, what do you think is the future of the NC2A? Because right now they're just
we're on the fence. I think we're teetering right now.
They're kind of hall monitors, and I understand that there has to be some kind of governing body. There has to be some kind of disciplinarian that we all answer to, but they're a bad disciplinarian. They have one job and they're not very good at it. You said they've had nothing but time to kind of get ahead of this and wrap their mind around it. Instead, you hear this all the time. They've had their head in the sand, just hoping this day wouldn't come, and here it is. Now, I think the three of us at this table and everyone listening to this podcast, we're all in agreement that the NC2A tournament is the greatest sporting event on earth. Mm-hmm. That's not going to go anywhere. But I just don't see the NC2A has not proven to me that they can grow with the ever-evolving world. Do you see them sticking with us? Is there a drastic change that needs to be made, or will basketball start governing itself?
Well, what I'm afraid of is that there's going to be some combination of these things, and you're going to get two or three kind of hands in there, or ideas, or people wrestling with these things. I would wish that they would actually just take the football and say, let's just put that off the table here, because you have to keep in mind football. If a young man, any three of us here, and there's probably only one who could have played at that level or something, want to be in the NFL, what's his only route? Is to go to college.
Yeah, right.
The young Rob Sacre now has opportunities. Maybe he doesn't want to go to college, or he's just going to go for a year, but you could play overseas. Mm-hmm. You can play in the G League, Development League. You could play those things. Jack, if you decide you want to play baseball, you can get into one of those minor league systems. And again, there are still some Caribbean countries, overseas countries you could play. But if a young man wants to get in the NFL, there's only one avenue to do it.
Go through.
And I think that's where we keep bumping heads with this, as I do start to worry about the NCAA basketball tournament. Are we going to see fewer and fewer young men and young women deciding that they want to go, even if it's only for a year, to college to have that great experience if there are these other avenues? You see the Mike Krzyzewskis and the Roy Williams, some of these longtime guys retiring. Is that telling you a little bit about what the future would come, or do they just say that the future is going to be different and they don't know how to deal with it? I do just worry so much when football drives so many of those things, and it's really those 65 schools. And now we get to that situation. How else are you going to get to the NFL? Strictly through college football. People say, well, the NFL should develop their own minor leagues. They make billions of dollars.
Yeah, a free one. They got a free one.
Absolutely. Yeah. So why would you do that or something there? They had all the concussion protocol. They've got all that money, and they didn't want to pay a lot of people. So I get concerned about it. I'm still optimistic. There is still something about the collegiate experience, the alumni, the friends, the family, and all of those things.
Everything. I think there's a huge bonus of going to school for 4 years. Granted, there's not a lot of things sometimes I think about, that class, I don't really remember what I'd learned. But at the same time, the people you meet, like even Jack,
even Jack.
I never thought when we were going to school, we had close friends, but we never hung out.
Sure, yeah, we were in the same.
But just
circle.
because over a period of time, we ended up reconnecting just based off of the Gonzaga whole deal. Mm-hmm. And that's the whole thing I think about college. A lot of kids at that time, you don't realize you're building like these relationships and this networking while you're in school, and you're just having fun with people. But over a long period of time, these people become real close friends to you, closer than your high school buddies, I would think.
I have very close high school friends, but Phil knows this. My Gonzaga friend network is a couple hundred people. It's insane. You know what I mean? And I know we talk about that a lot on this show, but I don't think it can be overstated. There's so many people on my phone who I'm close with their parents. Right. You know what I mean? And that I do think that's uniquely Gonzaga. I hate to continue to throw my sister under the bus. My twin sister went to UCLA. She's got 4 or 5 close college friends. Right. You know what I mean? Right. So it's just such a huge difference.
It is. And I think when you're doing the one and done, you miss out on that completely. And granted, you go into a whole different animal once you get to the league, but you miss that whole. It's cool to be there and just have those stories to talk about. Mm-hmm. Remember those experiences we did that, Jack? You remember that? Blah 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 blah. So I think it is important that guys go to school and do as many years as you feel like you can, and just enjoy that. But I just don't want to be a victim of our success and not have those Corey. We talk about this all the time on the show. Not have those Corys or Joels or those guys that are those 4 years to keep that tradition on. And I know Coach Few he'll do everything in his power to keep the tradition, but those guys, those 4-year, those 3-year guys, those are important for Gonzaga to keep thriving as well.
Sure.
The one thing I'm hoping that this name, image, and likeness, these other things don't change is the Gonzaga culture, especially the basketball culture. People oftentimes will say, well, how in the world does Gonzaga do that year after year? You must be doing this, you must be doing that, you must be doing something else. And you can't get them to understand the culture. But what I've often said to them, and I've had the opportunity to bring many people to campus, as I guess you guys have, the difference with Gonzaga basketball, we are still co-curricular rather than extracurricular. Meaning, if we were to go over to campus, in September, we will see our student athletes
mingling
with
them.
We'll see them in the dining room. We will see them in the dorm rooms. We will see them, as opposed to, and I'm not going to pick on UCLA, but I do know the University of Utah sometimes, where I'm not sure some of those people have ever even met 5 other students other than their teammates. So Mark Few, Mike Roth, and now Chris Standiford understand that. And, that's kind of what Tommy Lloyd, I think, is going to try to bring to Arizona, that we are still co-curricular rather than extracurricular.
I've never heard that phrase, co-curricular. That makes sense because, there is a certain amount of humility, I think, with Gonzaga basketball players, and that you walk around campus and you'll step off campus, in Spokane, and you'll be taking a million selfies, but around the Cog or the Smet or something. I mean,
because here's the cool thing about Gonzaga, and I think that's the thing about Gonzaga is it's so small, so you pretty much see everyone on campus in one of your, especially your class. You'll see at least one person from your class in one of your classes because it's such a small. I think the largest class size is 30. Yeah, 35.
No, there's like COM 101 classes that are like 45, 50, but
45. Yeah. So okay, and that's pretty much like you know everyone in that class, and you see everybody on campus. So it's like you just have this small. You don't feel like you're. No one doesn't see you as bigger than you are, I should say. I don't know.
To segue off of getting too big though as a program, Phil, I've mentioned this on the podcast a couple of times, and it's not the most popular opinion, but it scares me. Kentucky and Duke for a long time were the one and done destinations, the number one and done destinations, right? And when it works out, it's great. You get big time guys. They take you to the Final Four. They take you to a national championship. And, thanks for being here for 6 months. See you later. We've also seen that miss. I mean, Kentucky will have a down year just because they have a bad class. Duke will have a down year just because they have a bad class. I'm concerned that might happen to Gonzaga at some point. I mean, we've been so spoiled.
That's why it's so
important. 2 decades of these 4-year Corey Kispert guys who kind of grow into the program and grow into themselves. I certainly don't think it's going to happen this year, but just in general, I think it's a little bit of we could become a victim of our own success. And I'm only saying that because we've seen it happen to other big time programs. Has that ever crossed your mind?
Yes and no. I always think back to Rob may have had a classmate or somebody came in, and quite frankly, almost from the day he set foot on campus, he never really bought into the Zag culture. And if it had been up to his father, he would have only stayed 1 year, right? But he did stay the 2 years. But somehow we survived that because of the Rob Sacharies and Stephen Grays and the Matt Boldens. Then you start to see the Gary Bell and Gary Pangos then. And then you kind of come to you think about the next great one and done guy, didn't even start on our 2017 team.
That was the craziest one.
That's one of those things that, you'd say, all of a sudden you were one and done. That was just nuts. And Rob would know the NBA better than either you or I would, Jack. But I think sometimes they look at potential and they'll find the 18 or 19-year-old kid and say, here's what he's going to be at 22 or 23. I still think Mark Few is able to do that too. Look at the 18 and 19-year-old or sometimes younger and say, we need to either redshirt them, we need to work with them on the gray team, the scout team, whatever, because I do get a little concerned, but I think it's just been Jalen Suggs was just a one-of-a-kind generational special talent. But also, as I understand it, Jalen Suggs sort of recruited us. I mean, he could have probably gone any place, but he really wanted to come to Gonzaga, and his family did. So I'm believing that rubbed off on Chet Holmgren. So I would say, Jack, let's see where we are in 2 or 3 years. If we had one of those things that out of last year's class, because we had Strother and Dominic Harris, as far as I know, those guys are coming back to campus.
Sure, right.
Yep. I believe that the other players that are coming in with Chet Holmgren would still be here in a couple of years, as we'd see the Anton Watsons and some of those guys. The grad transfer is just a different animal that we've been able to do. I felt
better than anybody,
right?
Well, Gonzaga has set the bar for grad transfers,
and I think part of it is because again they come in with that culture. And I'll put Rob on the spot because I got to believe there are times as a player that coaches or other players would have looked and said, "Do you think we ought to recruit this McCarthy kid? Do you think this guy really fits in with us?" And I think there's still a lot to that we sort of understand who or what we are. But
there's a huge you get asked when guys, unless they have a crazy talent level, but you're asked, okay, how does he work? How does he fit? What do you guys? Coaches always ask your opinion on players when they were coming on campus as a recruit because that's who you have to play with. That's who you have to go into war with, and that they need your opinion just as much. So that was a cool thing about, talking to Coach P. What did you think? He'd always ask, what did you think about so-and-so?
Well, the NBA landscape too, from when you went in 10 years ago, I hate to say 10 years ago.
No,
like
you're
that.
right.
There was what, 2 or 3 other Zags?
Yeah,
There's 2 or 3 other Zags.
Yeah.
None of them were getting any playing time. Now there's double digits. You got an all-star. Like there's Gonzaga players in half the locker rooms in the NBA.
Right.
Which is incredible. It's crazy to think of. Another thing that's crazy to think of was how close we were to moving to the Mountain West 4 years ago.
Jack loves
Phil
to harp on
McCarthy.
this. He loves harping on this.
Well, Jack, and then I'll let Rob speak for himself, but I was privy to a little bit of that.
Mhm.
And for once when they asked me, because I'd been asked about 11 years ago about another team joining the conference, and I was very, very vocal in my opposition that there was just one school that didn't fit in with all these Catholic schools.
Oh,
in the
you
West
know
Coast.
I know
or
who it
something.
is.
It was
We're getting
just
back
such
to
an
that.
unusual thing. But part of that was going to be, oh, yeah, you don't want to bring somebody else like that in because you enjoy the success and you don't want to bring the real big people in or something like that. And quite frankly, I thought that school down south would dominate in things, especially in some of the women's sports or something, because they are able to fully fund that even Gonzaga isn't. But, so anyway, you had that particular thing. The Mountain West, when I was asked, said, keep in mind the Mountain West is still football dominated.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Should we have gotten in there? I'm afraid we would have had one of these things and say, why are we playing a Monday night in January in Laramie, Wyoming at 9 o'clock at night? It just makes no sense. But also, again, when I talk about our culture, you mentioned we've got siblings, we've got relatives, we've got spouses, we've got those families, and you can always find somebody said, yeah, I went to USF and then Gonzaga Law School. My son went to Loyola and then he was at Santa Clara and that sort of thing. Do you ever know anybody who said, I went to Gonzaga and then went to Colorado State Law School? Do you know anybody who said, well, I'm a Wyoming undergrad, so I could go to Loyola Law School or something? So I'm certainly not picking on those schools. But again, we talk about a culture. It was just such a far different thing. I'll let you guys weigh in on that a little bit because I don't know how serious it was. Obviously, Gonzaga did reap some benefits from those talks.
Yeah. Mike Roth said as much. He said, as soon as another girl was flirting with Gonzaga, the current girlfriend, I'm going to get myself in trouble here, but you know what I mean? The relationship changed. The relationship with the WCC changed. And I mean, I think anyone at the WCC would admit to that. That's how any contract negotiations go, or negotiations in general. Let's get back to BYU. You have an unbelievable relationship with Gonzaga, obviously. You also, I don't know if a lot of Gonzaga people are aware, you have a great relationship with the University of Utah, which means by default you hate BYU.
Well, let's just say you grow up wearing red and there's a school down south or something there. It was just, it was a bitter rivalry, especially because of football. So when Utah joins the Pac-12, all of a sudden the school down south had to do something drastic.
Doesn't even pitch his name out there.
So they suddenly went to this independent status in football.
Trying to be Notre Dame.
And then they needed to go find a conference to play in. And it was just kind of it's just an odd fit because you could take 5 arenas in the West Coast Conference and put them into that one school's arena.
They fill it up. They fill it up though, to their credit, right? Or only one Gonzaga's there.
Well, they do some of those nights. Now, when St. Mary's been there, they still have some of the in-state rivals or something. So, yes, it's a very rabid fan base. But, if you guys ever had the opportunity to play, it's just an unusual place or something here. I am just very, very glad we get out of there. I'll tell you one quick story, and I'm not going to apologize, but there was a former Utah coach who then was on the staff here with Mark Few.
Yeah.
And the first time the Zags had to play down there, they stayed down there. And honest to God, Kevin Pangos threw 2 of the strangest passes I've ever seen or something like. We had the opportunity to maybe cut it to either 4 or 5 at half. Pangos comes down and never did that, through some wild pass. Kid grabs it and scores. He misses the inbounds pass. Instead of going in down 4 or 5, went down like 10 or 11. There's something in the water. There's some environment or something there that makes that. But, so it's just such an unusual thing. But anyway, I asked Mark one of the very few times, he and I don't talk about a lot of those
Like
things.
X's and O's. Yeah.
But why in the world did you stay in this city? And he said, well, Ray thought it was a good idea. We'd play there. And I said, the only thing I'm going to tell you, Coach, is this. There's some great hotels in Salt Lake City.
The Grand.
And you can come in there, or they will oftentimes stay at that Monaco or Bombera.
Oh, forget the Monaco. The Grand Hotel is the best hotel in Salt Lake.
Right. The Monaco was built, though, for the NBA because they've got those 2 floors.
Yep.
If you stayed up there, that had like 8-foot beds. But anyway, I said, stay there. So they will fly in there, sometimes work out there, but they always bus into Salt Lake and then bus out of there. And the fan base comes and stays in Salt Lake. So one of the very few times I've stuck my nose into some things, but I said, no, please don't ever stay there again.
I'm with you on the culture fit of the WCC. I do think it's pretty cool. I've never really understood why we have Pacific for that same kind of reason down in Stockton. Right. Odd numbers, even numbers. To be honest with you, that's always kind of been my sticking point of avoiding the Pac-12. Not the biggest point is that we don't have a football team, obviously, and we would need, like you said, we need to bring somebody else in to make the numbers make sense. But as far as BYU is concerned, don't you think it's good for us? Don't you think it's great for the conference? There's fire in your eyes right now. Like I've never seen.
Right.
You know?
Right? The team down south.
Because for so long, it was just St. Mary's and maybe Santa Clara would have a good year or San Diego would get it going with Billy Greer a little bit. But BYU's consistently right there with us. Not right there with us, but contending.
It gives you a rivalry game that you can get revved up about or something there and fired up, because it's interesting when our Gonzaga group will come and they'll be down there much later somewhere to, have an adult refreshment and kind of, go through some of the games and things. And it does become that great topic, of sports talk for that week or something. So I suppose it has been good. It's just a different cultural fit. They have been awfully good. And I will say this, that I've had the opportunity to meet Dave Rose, their former coach, a couple of times. And he was a first-class guy. And he did the very best good with that, because they can have certain restrictions on the recruiting that other schools don't. And I've always just thought, as long as a kid goes there knowing this is what he or she signed up for, please don't come back and moan about that later. But I just struggle with them. I'm just happy when that game is over or something there and we move on, and they're sitting there on Sunday hoping that maybe they get a 12 seed or something there and have to play on Tuesday night in Minneapolis or something.
Oh,
yeah, that's got to give you some kind of satisfaction.
You just get so giddy about that part.
Just about every selection Sunday, they're stressed out.
Yes. Well, they have been in all these years because, and I'll tell you my personal thing on this. It has nothing to do with anything else except living in Salt Lake. So 2 years ago, we couldn't play the 2020 tournament, but our local radio and newspaper people are talking about, oh, what a terrible shame, because this team down south, this was a legitimate Final Four team, and they had all these seniors, and they'd have made this deep run, and they had this thing going on. And I finally called Bill Riley the one time. I said, now help me out for a second. Not only did they not win the conference, they didn't win the conference tournament. They didn't even play in the conference tournament championship game. So you're going to tell me a third place team from the West Coast Conference is a Final Four team? It was just ludicrous that way or something there.
They lost to St. Mary's in the semis, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And Jordan Ford was my favorite player there for about 24 hours.
And what gets me is they really thought they were going to come into this league.
Yeah, and win it every other year.
That was the thing that bothered me the most, is they thought they were going to come into the conference and just dominate. And it's never been that.
Yeah.
It's never been.
No, and keep in mind, so I think they've been in 11 years. They've never won the conference tournament or the conference.
Yeah.
So it just... We don't mean to pick on anybody or anything there. I'm just saying I have a particular thing like that. I just grew up on the other side of the river or something wearing red, so I've always struggled with that. So of all the different things that could have happened, all of a sudden now, if it's possible, if somebody's even closer to me at the University of Utah, we have to battle with twice a year. So it's an unusual thing, but we'll figure it out.
COVID has made it such that you had to watch more games, more high-profile games on TV than you would have liked to. Is it easier to watch a game on TV or in person in terms of your stress level?
it's easier for me to watch the game in person for a couple of reasons. One is that you can actually see all kinds of things on the court. Television shows you primarily the ball.
Right.
So how many times on television you say, what in the world was he looking at? How does he throw that pass? When you are at the game and you realize that, okay, it was a 7-foot window and he threw it 8 feet or something, those things can happen. Or what you don't see on television is coming around the corner that somebody set an elbow or a pick or something.
Oh, yeah.
And oftentimes you can look at some films of playing certain schools and you just know that you're going to see those chops and things. So I would much prefer to be in person. I'm just a nutcase at home on television because you can't get a sense of the crowd. You can't get a sense of the momentum.
In the whole environment.
It's just such a different thing. So now anytime I can go, I'm really looking forward to being back in the seats behind there and just making sure the officials know that every now and then I think I see calls differently than they do.
I'm asking this because I've had the privilege of knowing you for 10, 15 years. And I think above all, you're just a diehard basketball fan. It's
sports fan.
Simple as
sports
that.
Fan. He loves his.
You love the sport.
Football Utes. I know that.
My question is, because I'm terrible at this, and some of my friends are worse, most are better. How well do you deal with tough losses? Like, how long did that Baylor game stick with you in terms of like a personal level?
It really only stuck with me that one day because what stuck with me more was actually the North Carolina game from 4 years ago because we were right there.
Yeah.
I think we're up 1 in the last 2 minutes.
Right.
The Nigel 3. Nigel 3, yeah.
And that's one of those things because every now and then you can't do anything about it, but you keep thinking, okay, if we make the free throw, if the guy's foot really is on the line, going out of bounds, if the guy, again, credit North Carolina, the kid comes down, hits the 3. Baylor came out and punched us in the face. Punched us in the face and punched us in the face. I didn't get a chance to talk to either of you, but I think I may have said it to Huddy or Adam. I've never been in a game where I was so darn happy to only be down 10 at half. Remember? We all of a sudden got to 10.
We talked about
and I
it.
said there was a little breath of life.
The Anton bucket at the buzzer. Yeah, that was huge.
That was a relief. And you just got to give – just Baylor played the best basketball they could play at that time. It was just they played a perfect game offensively and defensively to the point where you just kind of just threw your hands up and said, well, like that, it is what it is. You can't, like, I hate saying that too, but like they just played phenomenal on both ends. And I don't think we could have really done anything different at that time to really adjust. It was just, they were hitting on all cylinders.
But Jack, on yours, I don't record games and then look at those things later because there's nothing else you can do about it. I'm sure if we called the NCAA, they're not going to change the score of any of those games. So I dwell on that a little bit. Interestingly, for me, sometimes the Baylor thing was a shade easier because Rob hit it right in the nose. They just punched us in the face.
Yeah.
We went to a zone. We stopped him twice. Then they put the guy in the middle, and all of a sudden, we, did.
No, they just played great.
Baylor, tip your hat to them. The kids went. The North Carolina of that, and the one that I was struggled the most with, there's something there, of course, was UCLA because, quite frankly, in 2006,
that was our year.
And I just didn't think we were going to get that shot again. People would seem to think they got spoiled from 99, 2000, 2001. We go to the tournament, we go to the Sweet 16. And you forget then that 2005, Roney gets a couple of funny fouls or something, and all of a sudden we're done. 2006, everybody should come in because, again, you forget how good a free throw shooter Ravio was and J.P. Batista. I mean, all those pieces are there. And
you had the number 1 college player in the country.
Right. And you let that thing get away. And it did. It took us a couple years to rebound from that. So that one was harder because I almost felt, so bad for Adam Morrison. I felt for those guys because I've never played at that level. But what it's got to be to almost have your heart ripped out. Just, Baylor ripped our heart out early, and that was that. UCLA and North Carolina ripped our heart out in the last minute.
It's funny you say that because I do remember 2017 after losing to North Carolina. I remember shrugging and thinking like, well, that's as close as we're ever going to get. Right. I had the same feeling Wichita State 2013 when we lost. I was like, well, we're never going to be that good. And
we just keep getting
the
better.
team just keep, I mean, it just beyond my wildest expectations to the point where I was bummed out for a few days after the Baylor
he was
game,
the
just
worst.
because that was such a great shot, and
Mr.
to go
Sour.
undefeated, the whole thing.
Mr. Sourpuss over here.
But I'm optimistic we'll be right back there this next year, and maybe that's just I'm setting myself up for heartbreak.
But
maybe.
I think everyone feels that way. I think everyone has high expectations. There's a lot of pressure on these guys, but pressure makes diamonds in this world. That's how I look at it.
So where were you in that, Rob? I mean, were you Baylor came out, punched in the face, they played well, there's almost nothing else we could have done?
I watched it, and I when we got back within 10, I just was like, okay, now if we can just chip away. But they wouldn't even let you chip away. I was so impressed on Baylor. It wasn't like we did something wrong, and it wasn't like we played a bad game. It was just how impressive they were during that game. Everything. When we hit a shot, they'd come back and hit a shot. Like when they needed to stop, they got to stop. It was just great basketball to watch. And like you said, you kind of have to just tip your hat to them because it was just well done. Well done. And like the game was just frustrating to watch because you felt for our guys because you could feel them wanting to come back, trying to do the things that were right to come back. But just Baylor just made sure they kept that distance the whole time, and it worked.
No, I tip my hat to them because I felt bad for them, but not as bad as a couple of those other games.
Those
because
games suck.
What was sad is that we, meaning Gonzaga, was put in the same breath with Indiana,
right?
But then we ended up as Indiana State,
right?
Oh, full circle. Yeah.
They were 33-0, and then Michigan State did almost the same thing to them because you didn't have the 3 in those days. So they got up about 8 or 10 and just stayed there. So fortunately, though, Gonzaga is not the Indiana State or some of those other things that have never, ever sniffed that again or something there. We've been able to retool and get better. So I'm really excited about this year's team. I'm excited about, we've had coaches, and we've got people coming back to be part of the program or something, but we still have the stability at the helm. So I'm feeling really good about that. Mostly we just feel good about Gonzaga. Make sure everybody knows we have a record freshman class of over 1,300.
Wow.
And so it's the top SAT and the top GPA.
So you're telling me my grades really matter?
Well, Rob, it was one of those things. There's something there. I always say my first year at Georgetown, I got a 4.0, 2.0 the first semester and 2.0 the second semester.
Yeah, to your point, I don't get into Gonzaga nowadays. I probably don't because I was like right on the cusp. 12, how long ago was that? 15 years ago.
He's got degrees in my world. That's what I was about.
You've been so gracious with your time. I do want to ask you a little bit about Tommy in Arizona. Arizona has been, one of the great non-conference rivalries we've had. Does it, I know it's probably tough to see Tommy leave the program, but it's got to fill you with a little bit of pride.
It does.
Yeah.
I deliberately left Tommy alone for a little bit, and then he had called me and I called him. We've had the opportunity to speak a couple of times because now I'm going to have to see him in Salt Lake City, but wearing a different uniform or something there. So no, I am just delighted for him. I'm delighted for his family. It is a great opportunity, and I'm just hoping that Arizona understands that and respects him and treats him properly and things and says, okay, this is going to take a little bit of retooling. People forget Arizona is not the Arizona 4 or 5 years ago. They have struggled a little bit on the court.
And they're definitely not the same Arizona 20 years ago.
Absolutely. So, I hope, again, people keep their expectations in there, but I'm happy for him and the opportunity. It's a great little thing for the, Pac-12 conference. And it'll be fun at some point when Arizona and Gonzaga play. It was always difficult for me when Gonzaga and Utah played because here's one family kind of almost helped create and another one you sort of, were born into.
Right.
So I know there will be a lot of those same things going on. But no, I'm happy for Tommy. It was obviously the right place at the right time because I can't believe that there would have been 2 or 3 other opportunities that he would have ever left Gonzaga.
You're going to be in Vegas?
Yes.
Watch us beat Coach K for the second time.
Let's take care of Duke. And apparently now, Rob and I talked earlier, apparently we are also going to be playing UCLA, we think in Vegas around that same time. So, yes, we will be in Vegas. We will be at all of those games because this was such a hard year to have to watch those things on television. And I don't think my wife or daughters ever want to go through that again.
Phil McCarthy.
Always a great.
I think number one, because you have such you wear so many hats. You do so many things behind the scenes for Gonzaga that people don't realize, and Utah. But I think, like I said earlier, I think the number one way to describe you is Gonzaga's number one fan. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Phil.
Good luck. Go Zags.
Woo.
Thank you once again to Phil McCarthy. Excellent stuff. Above and beyond. So gracious with his time. I am so tired, Rob.
I can tell. But you made it. You're a soldier, Jack.
But we soldiered on. We were waiting for it's sad. I feel bad for Joel.
Don't even put it out there. Don't.
He's going to be a 15-year NBA guy.
Yes.
We'll look back at this podcast and laugh. We'll laugh at all the teams for passing up on him at least twice. Nerds. What do you got for us, Rob?
If you want to be happy, do not dwell in the past. Do not worry about the future. Just focus on living in the present.